Hello everyone, it's Melanie here with Vintage Hill Studio. I'm so happy you dropped by today. I'll be showing you how to make this beautiful thank you card using Sizzix dies. I'll go through the supplies real quick. You'll see we'll be using the Sizzix Tatted Flower Garden and also the Spring Greenery dies and this Floral Vines embossing folder by Doris, as well as a We Are Memory Keepers Thanks embossing folder. So let's get started. I started with a black piece of cardstock that I put into the embossing folder, and you can see it has grid lines to help you line it up. Then I'll be using my Sizzix Big Shot and this multi-purpose platform. I'm going to the last one on the platform for embossing. Stick that into my machine, and again I have my cardstock lined up with those grid lines, which is very helpful. I'll run it through once, and then just to make sure I have a really good embossed impression, since it is on black cardstock, I'm using this little vinyl shim. It's not really rubber and it's not hard plastic, so I'll call it a vinyl. And that just gives it a little more of an impression so that my embossed thanks comes out a little easier to read. There, you can see that. Now to add a little more dimension to that, I'll be using this We Are Memory Keeper scoring board and my bone folder, and I just go 2 little notches off of each end, and I'm going to run my bone folder down those scoring lines, and I'll have a deboss line on each side of my thanks sentiment. So that completes the sentiment piece. There's a little close-up look on that. I'm working on a 5x7 card base, and I'm choosing a white mat that is also 5x7 because that's what I'll be using these that embossing folder on. So I use my grid here. I know my card is 7 inches in length, and this is where my banner is going to go, so I'm going to make sure that's centered at the 3.5 mark, and I'll just take a pencil and lightly make 2 little marks on here for me. That shows me where my banner's going. Since my folder is only 4x6, I'm going to use it on each side of where the banner will go, which means I'll be running my embossing folder through my machine horizontally. So I'll get that first side done. And you can see I made the pencil marks because I don't want to go below there. Whenever I adhere my thanks banner across, I don't want that embossing to show through my cardstock when everything's adhered together. So that's why I'm just leaving a space there in the middle for the banner. It only takes a few seconds to get both those sides done. I think it would be really pretty to emboss the thanks on the white area as well. But as you can see, as I go through and start adding my florals and leaves, I'm going to tuck those behind that black banner. Alright, here's my silicone mat, one of the best purchases I've ever made from a big box store in the kitchen section. This is actually for a microwave, and it works great for my crafting. So silicone, if you don't know, none of your adhesives will stick to silicone. Not your tape runner, not a liquid adhesive, and not hot glue. Anything that gets on your silicone mat will just rub right off. So it makes for a great surface when you're doing a lot of adhering. So here I go with that spring greenery. These are the pieces that I already cut out from those Sizzix dies, and I got all the flowers put together so this video isn't too long. And I decided to work and get those put at an angle across from each other, and you can see how they're going to fit up under the banner. So that's kind of my guidepost at this point, is where that banner is going to go. I'm going to go ahead and use up all these leaves I've cut out. Why not? So I start working in 3s here. Get that all adhered down, and then we'll move on to the fun part of adding the color with these beautiful little flowers. And again, those are all from the Sizzix dies. It cuts out all those shapes and sizes, and then I just took a little punch and did the black centers to tie that in with the banner. Now that I've got my leaves down, I can adhere my thanks banner right down the center. You'll see it goes right over those stems. It's pretty easy to align if you get the edges straight, then you know your banner will be straight across. Okay, it's looking good. Got the dimension from our embossing folder on the thanks and the floral vines, and now we add the flowers. And I'm just curling up the first and second layers of my flowers because I'm going to glue the back petals just flat. Of course, this has to go through the mail, so it needs to be postage friendly there, not too bulky. Starting with my pink, and I'll add an orange and a yellow to that. Get all those fluffed out a little bit. I used a little heavier cardstock for my flowers, so when I'm bending these petals forward, they kind of stay in place. Again, you can see I'm gluing the back petals just flat on my card. You can do these in any order you want, any colors you want, as few or as many flowers. It's all totally up to you. Makes the card making process so much fun. And I'll move on to the flowers in the lower corner there, and got those all adhered down, and fluff up the centers a little bit more. And I'll give you a look at the dimension on this card. So, goes together fairly simple. Now for the inside, I'll be using these Recollections die and the Stampability stamp. And the die actually cuts out the center and the detailed part, so I cut it out of white and then also out of black. So I'm using the black for my frame, and then that white for the sentiment in the center. And because this frame is so detailed, I bring over a little lid with some scrap paper and some spray adhesive, because there's no way I would try to glue this with just liquid adhesive out of a bottle. Even with a fine tip, it's just too detailed. So again, I use my grid. I know I'm at 5 inches, so 2.5 will put it centered. And I'll get that stuck down. The spray adhesive works so well, especially with black, because you don't have any residue from liquid glue. Now I'll bring over the sentiment and get that adhered right in the center of my rectangle. And just for a pop of color, I'm going to use one of the flowers I already had made up, since I didn't use them all on the front of my card. That ties it in nicely with the front. Life's most beautiful things are not seen with the eyes, but felt with the heart. I thought that went nicely with a thank you card. So here's a look at the completed card, the inside, my stamp on the back. And now we'll move on to lining the envelope, which is really easy and a quick process. All right, so here's a ready-made envelope. I take a quick measurement, and this is how I choose the papers for my envelopes, just in case you're interested. And I have many other YouTube videos on how to line different sizes and different shapes of envelopes, so go take a look at that if you like. But I just kind of go through, and this is like paper you would put in a copy machine, that weight. It's really lightweight paper, which you want for an envelope, and I just kind of hold my cards up to it and see what strikes me as being a good match for my card, or a good complement at least. So there was one that really caught my eye. It was kind of this raspberry color. And I decided to go with the one that's got a little white mixed in there. So I'll pull that out. These are 8x8 sheets. And I'm going to cut that down to fit inside my envelope. So my liner is 6.5 by 6 3/4. And I want to make sure it fits under the gum line of my envelope so that the recipient can close and seal their envelope when they're ready to mail it. So I take that out, look at the angle of the flap, give it a quick little cut. That's it. No dies are needed, no special measurements, anything like that. Slip it back all the way into the bottom. So here's where I want to make sure that it's even on from each end. See, I'm just really being careful there. I'll bring over my silicone mat, give it a little adhesion here. Again, making sure it's equally spaced from each side before I close the flap. Give it a little press, and there's your lined envelope. Wasn't that easy? So easy. Okay, one of the last things I do to make my work stand out is to make sure that I decorate the outside of the envelope in something quick and easy that goes with the theme of my card. So by using these clear stamps, I can kind of lay it over there and see what I want to use if I decide to use this bird cage and that little cluster of flowers. And I'm using VersaFine for my ink because I'm going to go over this with some watercolor pencils just to add a little color. I will clean off my stamps later with a baby wipe, which works really well for me. But for time's sake, I'm just setting it aside until I get through with this process. Again, lining up my envelope on my grid so I can center this little cluster of flowers right there at the 3.5 mark. Now I've chosen pencils that coordinate with the colors I used on my card just so everything ties together beautifully. And I'm kind of using the stamp set there from Momenta as a guide. I'm not going to color everything in, just a little pop of flowers here and leave the rest black and white. And I think that goes well with my card. Again, if you want to see other videos on how I line my envelopes and decorate them, visit the Vintage Hill Studio YouTube channel and you'll find a variety of options that will help you learn how to line cards and different ways to line them, even other than using pattern papers. So I hope you'll go take a look at that. Get inspired to try it. It's a nice finishing touch to the cards you spend so much time on. And you can see, of course I've sped this up, but look how quickly that envelope goes together. There we go. Here's a close-up look of the envelope and the card. And I really hope you enjoyed this video and that you get inspired to give it a try. I think the colors are really nice on this. The sentiment is nice. And of course we have our finished envelope, which makes it stand out. Come back and visit me sometime, and happy crafting, everyone.